Won't.
I know logic is not paramount.
Now that's what I call a sick burn.
Well, friends, here we are talking Star Trek Prodigy Season 2 once again, all the way up to the mid-season finale, or at least what was intended to be the mid-season finale before they dropped everything all at once. That's right, we're talking episodes 9 and 10, the ones entitled The Devourer of All Things, both parts 1 and 2. Now, there will be spoilers ahead. If those aren't for you, this is your last warning. Let's crack into the show. Boy, oh boy, did everything really ramp up in this episode. Definitely gave a lot of redemption to Picard Season 2. It took a dropped, missed opportunity story point, a couple of things that were very kind of, really just thrown at us and not utilized in any real meaningful way, and it just took those pieces and said, you know what? We're going to actually build an entire story, an entire universe, an entire plot around the Wesley Crusher Traveler thing, as well as the Gary 7 Supervisor connection. Genius for them to kind of pick up those loose threads, pun intended, I suppose you could say, and really utilize it in a manner that was, in my opinion at least, very effective and reminiscent of a lot of the beta canon stuff out there. Not one-to-one comparisons or anything like that. They're not taking a novel and actually representing that story on the screen. And that's something Prodigy has really done well with since its very inception. They've taken elements from the novel specifically, but other things, maybe comic books and video games, and even things that have mostly been relegated to the realms of the forgotten, that being the animated series. Now, Lower Decks has done the same thing there, so kudos to all of these people kind of representing the animated series in a good way, unlike the very, very extremely short treks, which were just, fingers crossed, not the last time we're ever going to actually see George Takei as Sulu. Again, I digress, nothing to do with this. There is a lot going on in these two episodes. They very much changed the status quo, not only of the course of the rest of the show, but the overall, I almost said universe, but that's not even a great way, multiverse, omniverse, whatever you want to call it, because this really is an existentially grand scale. Now, we learn in this episode that Wesley Crusher definitely has a bit more power to him than we were kind of led to believe back in TNG. The Travelers are even more integral to the nature of reality than we kind of were shown there. They're not just a single universe entity. They can travel all over the place. They can go to every reality. They can alter timelines. The Time Termites or the Displacer Beasts or the Loom or whatever you want to call them, they were kind of a cool design. I'm not entirely certain how I feel about their look. Yes, they're threatening, but they're very just more beastly with a little bit of Cthulhu thrown on them, and not quite as existential dread as I would have liked, considering what they actually do. They don't just kill you, they erase you from the existence, the tapestry of the universe, all of that stuff. I have to imagine we are not going to get any sort of reversal on the red shirts and all of the people that were kind of just blinked from existence, so I suppose us as the audience are the only ones who have any memory of them actually existing now. I was one of the ones who wasn't very impressed with Wesley's appearance in Picard Season 2. It seemed more like he was just Will Wheaton walking off the set of the after show and too giddy to be there. This goes a long way to kind of showing why he might be acting that way. He's definitely kind of gone a little bit loopy. He's having some sort of absent-minded professor type stuff. He is a very smart person. He's a very competent person. We saw that in TNG. Way over the top sometimes. He was way too competent and way too brilliant. But this is showing that maybe these traveler powers are overwhelming to a mortal human mind. And he's gone a bit cuckoo, a little bit bonkers, turning into a different character, but still retaining the core essence of Wesley. And while maybe he was just a bit too over the top in these episodes, it really did make sense with the grand scale of everything they were drawing for us, and he was just losing his marbles to the vast complexities of the multiverse. Very cool to have some sort of references to the various Star Trek timelines. The Prime Universe was confirmed to be the one they're existing in. However, there are two states that the universe is trying to coexist within. That's not good. It's tearing holes in the fabric of reality, the tapestry, as they said, which, of course, immediately made me think of that Q episode with Picard. I know that wasn't probably the intended purpose, but of course I'm going to go there. They mentioned the mirror universe, the Narada incursion, fluidic space, the mycelial network.
You're not supposed to know about that. Okay, forget I said anything about that. It doesn't exist.
A couple of other references to other time travel things we saw in Temporal Mechanics 101, they reference some ways of time travel. Here, Wesley was using Borath crystals combined with the Orb of Time, which was kind of interesting. Is there more than one Orb of Time, or is he working with the prophets? I suppose they're non-linear entities. Maybe they're in the same kind of hierarchy as these Traveler and Supervisors. That would be interesting. I don't know if I want them to link all of these things, but again, I digress. Not really part of the story going on here. But the fact that they called them Borath crystals instead of time crystals, I don't know why, that just makes it a little bit more palatable to me. The universe trying to exist in two states definitely makes sense with the way they were setting things up earlier, and it kind of adds some more context to why the time travel rules in this storyline are more Back to the Future-y than other types of time travel within Star Trek. There are two states of the universe kind of in flux, and that's sort of why Gwyn was the focal point there. She can't exist in both of them. The feeding on dying timelines, that definitely feels reminiscent of a couple of the novels. Also, they pulled in quite a few sort of pseudo-references, not only to Star Trek, but to things like, the Marvel Universe. It kind of seems similar to the Doctor Strange thing, seeing he looked through all the possibilities and only found one outcome where everything went well. Like the fact that he wasn't necessarily so certain on how to get to that one outcome. And of course, we find out later that Majel is actually the key, the seventh component to kind of keep this team together, this time team, I suppose we can say. I'm not entirely certain why. Is it the connection between Majel and Zero, or is it something more esoteric? As I said in my last video, I was slightly disappointed we didn't get to see Majel there when Zero transferred into the organic body. However, that was dealt with here. Although one thing that was just maybe a slight missed opportunity was when Janeway finally encountered these people towards the end of the second episode. She had no reaction whatsoever to Zero being in a corporeal organic body. Now, I didn't necessarily need any long, drawn-out conversation, but just kind of a look. Again, there was no time to really spend with any of that, so I don't fault them for not showing it. This is just something that if you were in a lived organic universe, probably would have occurred. At least just a look from Janeway like, okay, we're doing this now. While we're on the topic of Janeway, it was great to see both her and the crew of the Voyager A and the ship in general just taking action and taking part in the storyline. She's felt kind of shunted to the side, not really doing all that much to progress the story, but we saw from the very beginning here, she was able to track down their course pretty quickly, found the Borg transwarp hub. She kind of just ignored Jellicoe doing that normal Starfleet thing where, oh, we can't hear you anyways, bye, we're gonna go do our own thing. To see her in her little combat, just her tank top or whatever, that was fun. Nice to see flying the shuttle, shooting phasers, all of that stuff, especially with her grim determination that she has to protect her crew no matter what. One thing I was a little bit iffy on, and I think this was actually explained earlier on, is why couldn't they alert Voyager to kind of equip the ship with some type of temporal shielding? Now, I know it was mentioned earlier that they couldn't equip temporal shielding, which would allow them to actually traverse that 52-year time wormhole or something, but we have seen in Star Trek before they are able to modulate the shields to do some type of temporal shielding, especially in Year of Hell. Now, that was a forgotten timeline, so it's not like they have that information at hand. Just something I thought about, and it definitely could be explained away within the story why they couldn't do that. They didn't have enough time. They didn't have the right frequency. I mentioned I was going to talk about a couple of the visual references I thought were in this episode. First, when they went through that little time portal to Gary Seven's office, or at least the reconstruction of that, it looked a lot like the time portal from Evil Dead 2. Now, I don't know if that was necessarily supposed to be the case, but then shortly after, Wesley even said, "This is groovy." Could just be a reference to the time period, but I'm going to go ahead and assume this was an Evil Dead reference. Similarly, there was a couple of other things like that time stream when they said not to look at your own future or whatever, and of course Del did. It definitely seemed fairly reminiscent of the Doctor's time stream over in Doctor Who when Clara jumped in it to visit all of his past incarnations. Don't know if that was necessarily the intended purpose there, but they've already referenced Doctor Who fairly heavily this season, so I'm going to go ahead and lean towards yes, that was intended. Also, when he activated the rings around that very same time stream and it changed appearance, that looked very reminiscent of that water shield in the very last episode where he was a main cast member, the final mission of TNG. Don't know if that was intentional or not, but then they also showed on the screen the warp bubble from the parallel universe that he trapped his mother in Remember Me, so I have to imagine they were just throwing in a lot of Wesley references, not even to mention all of the commentary on freaking sweaters in this episode. Now, I'm sure I missed approximately 432 other things I intended to talk about here. There is just so much jam-packed into these episodes, and that just makes me wonder, how would this show fare and how would it feel if it was more structurally similar to a classic 90s era Star Trek where you had time to sit down and breathe and kind of digest all the things that happened? I'm not faulting Prodigy whatsoever. That's the format of the show. That's definitely the format of a children's show. Not that I really want to give it that moniker anymore. Just makes me wonder how it would feel to actually be given a bit more time to digest and live within the decisions that were made. I mentioned a few videos ago that I was reserving my judgment for all of the problems that were seemingly solved a bit too easily until they actually gave us the reveal to that behind-the-scenes time benefactor. All of that was well done in this episode, so I have no further lingering problems with that. It really all made sense. Going forth, it seems like our time team is going to be trying to put right the entire Prime timeline, possibly even the entire multiverse, and I am very intrigued to see where we go from here. Looks like they got to the protostar, they met Chakotay at the end of the episode. Not entirely certain what's going on with their avian friend. Hopefully he's there because I just want to see more of him. Aurelian, I think, is a species, but what did you think of this episode? How did you find all of the grand reveals? Are you excited for the back half? And just whatever you think, leave all that down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all those fancy YouTube things. But until next time...
You don't like it when I match my weapons to your phase variants? Then come get me and tell your friends.